Well, good morning to everyone who's here and everyone who's on Zoom or online, wherever you are. This morning, I'm going to be talking about restoration. And the definition in the dictionary says the action of returning something to a former owner, to a former place, or a former condition. So if you think spiritually as well, that kind of relates. And the other definition is the return of a monarch to a throne, a head of state to government, or a regime to power. But there are lots of examples in the Bible. I'm not going to read all the verses. I just sort of glanced down at what it said about restore in the Bible, the kind of things that God can restore. So these are just some examples. Pharaoh will lift your head and restore you to your position. Moses put his hand back into his cloak, and then when he took it out, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. Somebody said about cities being restored. These are things that God restored in the Bible. These are just examples. Then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes and have compassion on you and gather you again from all the nations where he scattered you. In Samuel, there were towns that were restored to Israel, towns that had been captured by the Philistines. They were restored and the peace was restored. Land that belonged to Saul's grandfather was restored to him. And then he said, today the Israelites will restore me to my grandfather's kingdom. Some of these things may apply to you. When you think about your life, these things that were restored by God in the Bible, some of these might just trigger something in your mind. A wonderful one, I think, is where the Lord said he would restore his covenant blessing instead of a curse. Oh, my goodness, don't we want that covenant blessing with God rather than a curse? David's fallen tent, it says, its ruins I will rebuild. God was saying he would rebuild that fallen tent, that habitation. In Corinthians, New Testament, it says, wherever you are weak, you are strong. And our prayer is that God may fully restore you and restore your strength. It says, if brothers and sisters are caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. And I've been having conversations with people recently that we don't think enough about this. We don't do this enough in the church. Restore people gently. In 1 Peter, it says that after you have suffered a while, God will restore you and make you strong, firm, and steadfast. And in the book of Revelation, it talks about Eden being restored. So those are just a few examples. But here are some of the things that we might think in our lives. Right. Some of the things that might be restored in our own lives. If we think about restoration, what do we mean? Sometimes we might think of returning to some previous level of happiness. Some things happen in our lives that cause us to come to a more difficult place or a place of pain. And we wish that we could be restored to a previous place of happiness. The restoration of something lost. All kinds of things can be lost. I won't start listing them. It's not just people we lose. We lose all kinds of things in our lives, and we long for restoration of something that we've lost. We can think of returning to a former age. We can look back at our lives and have happy memories or happy places or happy people, and we would love to return to that former age or that former place or that state of mind. Going back in time is something that we link with restoration, or the repair of something that we broke or that was broken. But these thoughts are really largely to do with because we think in the framework of time. Somebody's going to have to fix this for me. We think in the framework of time. This is male and female, when you look at the lifespan, starting from a baby, toddler, the different experiences you might go through, and then when we're old, we might look back and think, oh, I wish I could have the strength I had when I was young. Or sometimes married women or people who've had children, they think, oh, I wish I could restore my figure to when I was younger. Or I wish I had the strength I did. And God talks about all of us becoming like a child. But we think within this time frame. We think of our lives on this time track. And this can sometimes be a little bit limiting, because God is outside of time. And if we think of our timeline, some of the things we go through, childhood, family, we can all think of school memories, memories of our teen years, maybe marriage, career, maturity. Oftentimes when we get older, we start to self-evaluate, and a lot of us may have regrets. I know I have regrets in my life about things I could have done better. And if I remember those things, they hurt me again. And I feel frustrated about those things. And with aging, a lot of difficulties come into our lives with the process of aging. And a lot of those detrimental effects are obvious. But also, there can be benefits of aging. You can care less about what people think of you. Sometimes when you're older, you don't get as worked up about what people think of you or what people say about you. And there's wisdom that comes with age. So we have to start thinking about ourselves, our lives, outside of this conveyor belt of time. Because if we think of restoration from God's perspective, he's outside of time. So it's not just a question of restoring something that we've already experienced, or restoring a time when we were different, or we were a different person, we were a different stage, because really we've done that already. So I used to think, well, what's the great thing about restoring something that I've already done? I've been there, lived that. Even if it was a good memory, it's still not any great shakes, really, to restore something within that time frame. But if we start to lift our thoughts outside of time, then we can start to get an image of what God really means by restoration. What does he really think when he's, outside of time? It's hard for us to imagine. But what does he mean? If you think of eternity, so restoration working forwards and backwards and just exploding out of time, what does that mean? What does that look like? This is a diagram of light going into the eye. So any object that's outside, the light is reflected from that and goes into the eye. And we know it goes upside down on your retina and your brain sorts it out. But I was thinking how the vision of God is the opposite way round to this. He's got the picture. He's got the vision of what he wanted for each one of us. And the light is coming out of his eye. The light is coming out of his existence, his being, to form the picture that he wants for each of our lives. So what kind of things did he want for your life? When he first thought about you, before the beginning of what we know as time, what did he imagine for your life? He knew you when you were being formed in your mother's womb. He knew you, the concept of you, before you were even conceived. He knew you from before he created time. What did he imagine to become reality when he was thinking about your life? And this, I believe, is what God talks about when he talks about restoration. It's not about returning us to some previous moment in time. It's about restoring that vision that he had for your life. Everybody different. You are unique, and you have a unique purpose. God had a reason for thinking up you. He had a reason for wanting to create beautiful you. And it's different from anybody else who exists. I thought these are some of the things that God looks for in our lives. It's not exclusive, it's just some ideas. Love. We know that God is love. So when he's looking at our life, some of the things that really register with God are loving God with all of our heart, all of our strength, all of our mind, loving others as ourselves. But the start of that, just receiving the supernatural love of God, that's a huge landmark in a person's life. That acknowledgement to receive the love of God. Submission, once we know who he is to a measure and we receive his love, that submission to God, acknowledging Jesus Christ as Lord and Saviour of our souls and seeking his will and purpose then for our life. And that leads on to service and obedience, because he says, if you love me, keep my commandments. These, I think, are things that have significance in our lives. But again, we think of them on that timeline, on that conveyor belt. And at any point in time, we can come to surrender to God. We can receive his love. We think, right, from this point, God's purpose now is starting to work in me. But I think it's much more encompassing than that, because I think God can look at our life as a complete entity. And if he looks and sees us receiving love, us submitting to him, then that can affect the whole lump. That doesn't just now start, restoring. We're starting to receive the blessings of God. We're starting to walk in the purpose of God. Once he sees that in our life, he can make all the past and all the future and everything outside of time. He can make the whole entity that is you submit to his. Once we submit, he can do that miraculous job on the whole of our lives. Some of us think that the things we've done in the past, we're still bogged down by those things. But even the rubbish, even the faults, even the cracks in the porcelain, all the stuff, he can just bring all that into reconciliation with his plan and purpose, his vision. He can restore his vision in all of that is our life. An acorn, you've all been given an acorn, I hope, on the way in. And some will be saying, oh, can we eat it? It looks like marzipan. Please don't eat them. Not good for you. They're not marzipan. They're just a little reminder when you go away to think about the restoration of God in our lives. In that acorn is all the genetic coding to make a great oak tree. It's hard to believe, isn't it, that little acorn, when it falls in the ground, can grow in time, can grow into a mighty oak tree that gives shelter to other creatures, that stands strong as a landmark. You can look over hillsides, you can look for miles, and you can see a mighty oak from a distance, just from that little acorn. And God has put all the genetic coding in you for that mighty oak, that tree of righteousness that he calls us to be. We're called to be trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord. But he's put all that genetic coding in you. He's put everything you need to become that person, that entity that he wants you to be, standing strong, that people will see, that witness, giving shelter to others, whatever he has purposed. But he can use everything back and forth in time. When God talks about restoration, he means restoring our life, the entity that is us, our soul, our being, and restoring that to the image that he originally had for us. Not just the former state of our life or age, but the full, vibrant, purposeful, brilliant thing that he dreamed up you to be. God's restoration works on all our genetic coding, all our experiences, even the ones we thought were negative, all our hopes and dreams. Because of the cross, all our mistakes, all our shortfall, all our little mess-ups, all our weaknesses can become part of that picture. It can all be used. Because everything brings light and shade. And everything can be redeemed. Not just forgiven, but restored to become a valid part of that beautiful created entity, which is his child. When you look at a tapestry, you can see that all the colours, all the shapes are needed to complete the picture. This is a cushion that has really bright, vibrant colours, but the light and shade, everything's needed to make that complete picture. Some parts of our lives may seem quite sharp. This is from another tapestry, and those points just seem quite sharp, don't they, like thorns. They might seem even painful. Some of our experiences are sharp and painful. They just look like pointed thorns. But if you zoom out of this tapestry, you see that those sharp points are actually fingers on a hand. And zooming out again, that hand is part of a person. This part of the picture is obviously beautiful. Like you just look at that and think that's pretty, don't you? And it's got shape and form. And if we zoom out, you can see it's part of a bigger pattern. Something beautiful, something that's got style and order, something pleasing. But when we look at the whole picture, the pattern is what's down the side here. It's just framing the whole picture. And the picture is of 4 characters. And if you look at the far end there, you can see the man with the hand and those sharp points that were his fingers. We see that he is a servant. He's serving these characters who are what the tapestry is about. And it made me think about those sharp elements of our lives, that maybe some of those are actually serving us. Certainly in God's plan of restoration, those pointed, painful things can become part of that beautiful picture. They can serve what the picture is about and the people that the picture is about. In this case, you. Because your life is your tapestry. You're the key person. What Jesus restores, you're the star of that show. You're the star of your life. It's not somebody else. You're not there to make somebody else's life magic. You are the star of the show in your life, what God has created you to be. So at any point in time, this is what I believe, at any point in time, at any point in your life, we can choose to surrender to God, to love him with all our heart, all our mind, all our strength. But at that point, God's miraculous restoration process begins. So it doesn't just work forward in time or backwards. It works outwards. His power now explodes through our whole existence, restoring things unto himself, restoring all things, it says, unto himself, using all those experiences, all those thoughts, actions, all those feelings we had, and he brings them into reconciliation, conforming them to the image that he has for our lives. Come to Jesus today. Allow his restoration process to begin in your life.